Welcome to Thinking Through the Darkness, a Lore by Spec podcast, with me, your host, Spec. This is a podcast where we talk through all of the pre-production that goes into making the theories that you see on the Lore by Spec channel and its associated channels. Let's get the shilling out of the way first. If you haven't gone and subscribed and liked and commented on the videos on Lore by Spec on the YouTube channel, please go ahead and do that now. That's one of the best ways that you can support me. This podcast is also available anywhere that you can find podcasts. So if you are listening, if you could like the podcast and maybe leave a little review, that does wonders for the algorithm on the podcast side, which really helps. And if you want to help support this podcast, this is the only one that currently doesn't use free tools. And since it's a paid thing, if you have the means to contribute to this, the link for this is in my description for my Ko-Fi. This helps me keep the light on and pay for all of the things that go into making this podcast a quality project. A while ago, I put up a video that said that Quadratum was a prison. The trailer gave us some answers as to what that could possibly mean as to whether or not I was right or not. And I think I might not be as far off, might not be so hypothetical anymore. In the last podcast, we talked a lot about how there seems to be different people converging on one place, very much FNAF 6 style. And let me just see if I could find it. Yeah, so this is the quote from FNAF 6. Connection terminated. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth, if you still even remember that name, but I'm afraid you've been misinformed. You're not here to receive a gift, nor have you been called here, but by the individual that you assume. Although you have indeed been called, you have all been called here, into a labyrinth of sound, smells, misdirection, and misfortune. A labyrinth with no exit, a maze with no prize. You don't even realize that you're trapped. Your lust for blood has driven you in endless circles chasing the cries of children and some unseen chamber, always seeming so near, yet somehow out of reach. You will never find them. Not one of you. This is where your story ends. And to you, my brave volunteer, someone who found this job listing not intended for you, although there was a way planned out for you, I have a feeling that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be. I'm remaining as well. I am nearby. This place will not be remembered, and the memory of everything that started this will finally fade away, as the agony of every tragedy should. And to you, the monsters trapped in the corridors, be still and give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. For most of you, I believe that there is peace and perhaps more waiting for you after the smoke clears, although for one of you, the darkest pits of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, old friend. My daughter, if you can hear me, I knew that you would return as well. It's in your nature to protect the innocent. I'm sorry that on that day, the day that you were shut out and left to die, that there was no one to lift you up into their arms the way you lifted others into yours. And then what became of you? I should have known you wouldn't be content to disappear. Not my daughter. I couldn't save you then, so let me save you now. It is time to rest. For you and those who you have carried in your arms. This ends for all of us. End communication. I see so many parallels to FNAF 6 in terms of this being a creation of the Master of Masters in the same way that Traverse Town appears in the Kingdom Hearts universe. We'll call it reality for the need and necessity of distinction. That Traverse Town pops up whenever somebody is afloat and in need of refuge, versus Quadratum that I feel is more like a prison. I feel that way primarily because of the Heartless. not just because of all of the players who are gathered into this one specific space. But we get this indicator from the second trailer of our narrator, who's female this time, saying that there was no concept of darkness before it came with us. And I waxed philosophical about this in my initial impressions that is a weird thing to state, and that's a weirder thing to declare, because if you could choose that whatever you want darkness to be representative now could in fact be anything, you technically have dominion over that now. You have control over that now. Why would you choose something that is so representative of reality's versions of Heartless? The other indicator that I think that is quite a tell is the design of the Heartless themselves. I dig into this quite a bit, like I said in the first reactions trailer, but it's something that I want to reiterate here, is that the Darksider in its reality form is made up of tendons and wires and inherently looks very mechanical. It's all sinew and tissue, and if you break down some of the scenes, it's very clear that it feels like these are being drawn into being a form. It is darkness being funneled into a form. It's also very daty. It's very... the Darksider's punches and how the hand looks look like data cables. They look like connected tissue. They look like it's information being sent from one to another. It doesn't look like something organic or something that you would inherently know or identify as being an original or an organic item from another world. This isn't me saying that I think Quadratum is itself data. What I'm saying is that this feels very self-contained, and that this will be something that we will be able to drop in and out of. And the new Keyblade that we see that looks either quite Moana-y or quite Treasure Planet-y is very indicative of that where we are is going to be quite self-contained, that will have its own rules and interactions, but yet not quite in the similar vein of what we all know and what we all assess with world order, about how each world should know that the others don't necessarily exist. I think it's quite like how on our own planet we are aware that, you know, while I'm in Ireland, I'm aware that Germany exists, and I'm aware that the US exists. And when I hop on a plane to go to either of those places, I am somewhere new that is very definitely isn't Ireland, or, isn't what I know, and has its own rules and principles and language and interactions that make that work. But until you actually go somewhere and experience it, you don't really get a sense of an embodiment of a new place or experiencing something that you haven't before without actually being able to mentally process it. And Quadratum doesn't feel like that. Quadratum feels like what you would explain to someone else that Japan might look like, of what unreality might look like if you were proposing it to someone. It feels very fabricated. The same way with the other darknesses, we see that some of them are trying to be rock forms or trying to be other bits and pieces, but it's very clear when you see someone knocking them up that they are shells. They don't actually have organic forms in them at all. They are, in many ways, shells. It's the same way with the new Neos, that they look like things that they look very marionette-y in their own respects. They look like approximations. They look like mannequin. They don't actually, they represent something that you would then put on them, not actually being true and in of themselves. For me, that has a lot of indicators for me that this is all approximations of what a place should be and what a place should look like. Not actually be representative of a world that has its own movement and its own body. Another indicator that would give credence to me that this is more of a prison and that I might be more onto it is in popular media how prisons are often depicted in terms of like the rote of day to day in life. It's normally that, post-capitalism grind of day in, day out. If you could choose any way to fit unreality and map it onto something, why would you choose something that is still very close in terms of approximations to what not just the characters would know, but the players? The reason I say that is we do have approximations for this in terms of San Fernocchio. We have seen big sprawling cities and how how they're meant to behave. We have seen the world that never was in terms of its mass, city skyscapes. We have seen huge approximation of worlds and how things work in terms of a city, in terms of Scala et Caelum. We have approximations for what big sprawling cities look like in reality. The same way in our own worlds, we have those same approximations for what big cities look like. But I'm drawn to the parallels of the Matrix and the simulations that when Neo is being taught about the Matrix and how to break free of the Matrix, they always happen in these sprawling cityscapes because it's familiar, but it is inherently a prison. It is inherently a trap where things are just very clearly approximations of things rather than them being the real deal. Do I think this is a sandbox that ultimately the gang have worked out how to escape from? I do think that's what the current order of Sigurd, Luxford, Streliza in many ways have worked out how to move in and out of, the same way the barriers from the original worlds from KH1 all got taken down so that they can be accessed throughout each other. I think a similar thing has been invented there, much like how flight and sailing and trains, etc., have allowed us to move from country to country to experience new islands and such. So we may not be as far off from the realization that this is inherently more of a prison than we have given credit for. The other thing that also springs to mind is there is a freeze frame, and you will only see it if you have gone through the trailer in the same way I have. But when Sigurd is on screen, in the background, it is the leg of that Darksider. And since he's so happy and smiling and beaming about that Darksider, Sigurd is in no way deems that Darksider as a threat. In fact, he seems very doesn't really care either way about it. And I think that tells us something, that if something that is that big and is having such a huge reaction from other people around it as it being some sort of huge, vicious threat, and yet the people who are in the know, who know that this is not necessarily real or as big a threat as it looks, are the people who are aware that there is more happening here, or maybe less happening here, than we may have realized to begin with. This has been Thinking Through the Darkness, a Lore by Spec production with me, Spec. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me today. Just as a reminder, don't forget, if you haven't followed the Lore by Spec YouTube channel, go ahead and subscribe. It's free there. If you haven't taken the time to review the podcast or dropped a like and a comment, those really help too. And if you ever feel inclined to help me keep the lights on over here, head to Ko-Fi, which is in my description, to help support the podcast. Once again, thank you all so very much for listening, and I will see you all next time.